been programming radios for a long time, and it's gotten much easier. How many of you have tried to program in frequencies for one of your Chinese radios from the keyboard? Exactly. How many of you have done it from the computer at this point? Okay, good. Okay. Turns out the biggest problem we have when trying to program radios from the computer isn't the programming software. It's the cables and drivers. And I'm going to talk probably more about cables and drivers than I am about the actual software. I'm going to talk about, focus on Chirp because it's the most generic software around and it's free, but also I'm going to talk a little bit about manufacturer-supplied software and about RTS System software, which is a paid-for software. It's a software you can buy for your radios, along with cables. Talk a little bit about where to find repeaters and frequency lists, and the files that I've already put on the website under my presentation. And I'm going to go through a lot of material here, and a lot of the slides I'm going to show, I'm not actually going to talk much about. I put them there as reference material, so that it's all in one place on the website. Go to the website, look at today's presentation, and you'll find all this additional information. Why are we interested in PC programming your radio? First of all, anybody that's tried to program any of the modern radios from the keyboard finds out real quickly, you don't want to do it. It's about taking control of your ham experience, making your radio do what you want it to do in the most convenient way possible. That's one of the things I found with one hand that doesn't work very good. The easier I can make it so the radio does the work, the happier I am. You can't remember enough frequencies to enter them all by hand anyway. You need to have it set up so they're stored in your radio. It doesn't work for you. Almost all manufacturer-supplied software is Windows-based. Chirp and RTS Systems support Mac. Chirp does a very good job of supporting especially Ubuntu Linux, but a couple of other Linuxes. So most of them I'm going to talk about today is Windows. Talking about trying to get the Chirp running in Linux is an hour presentation all by itself, so I'm not going to go there today. Once you get over the hump of getting the cable and drivers working, software is easy. I'll show you that. We've talked about keyboard programming. One of the things I like is being able to glance at a spreadsheet and kind of have a big picture of everything that I've got programmed in the radio. Lets you organize things in sequence. We have a number of repeater networks in Colorado that have from a few repeaters to dozens of repeaters that can be connected. Being able to put all those in consecutive groups in the memory programming makes it much easier to keep track of what you're doing. And finally, how many have more than 3 or 4 HTs? At this point, last count, I had about 20 HTs floating around and probably 15 mobiles. And if they're all programmed differently, you end up not using the radio because you can't figure out where anything is. So using something like Chirp, where you can program them all with similar memory structures, makes it much easier to move from one radio to another, even when they're very different. I'm going to talk a fair amount about cables because this can be one of the big problems. We go from HT type cables over here on the left, and this is what's commonly referred to as the standard Kenwood connector, because Kenwood started out with this connector 20 years ago or more, and probably 80% of all the, that's a number out of my butt, of all the HTs on the market use that connector, and for programming as well as for microphone external speaker. And it works very well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that cable, but I'm finding them now on eBay for $3. And those work fine. You have to be very careful about knowing what you're doing with the drivers on. We'll talk about that quite a bit. Increasingly, we're seeing radios use standard USB connectors for programming, thank God. I'll talk more about that. And I want to make a point of the fact that the standard 1/8" type phone plug, there are a lot of variations on the way that plug is used with radios for programming. In fact, the 2-conductor plug like this is commonly used by ICOM for programming on their base stations. It's their CAT connector, computer-aided whatever programming connector. But there's 4-conductor versions of that 1/8" phone plug with a screw-in connector for waterproofing on ICOM HTs. There's 3-conductor versions. They're used on a fair number of Chinese mobiles. And there's 4-conductor versions that are still used on a lot of different HTs. So you can't just pick up an 1/8" phone plug and think it'll work. There are very different versions of it. I want to make a point of the Cat 5 or Cat type connector, the RJ45 connector. You need to be very cautious with that one as well. A lot of mobiles use that for microphone connector and for programming connector. Works great, it's a nice connector. The problem is, especially on the Chinese radios, it seems like every manufacturer wires it differently. And if you're not using the right programming cable, you can in fact damage your transceiver. So you need to be a little bit cautious about that. Finally, a lot of mobiles, ICOM and Yaesu and Kenwood, use this DIN type connector for programming, as well as for a data connector for packet connections. And that one you don't really have to be very careful with, because if it fits your radio, it probably will work. Standard USB connector there's no real electronics in this. It's just wires connected to the connector. Almost all the programming connectors, programming cables we use, are going to have this big bulgy thing. There's actually electronics in there. It's a converter, because most radios want to talk over an old RS-232 kind of connection. That's what they're actually expecting to see in their programming connection. Most computers don't have that RS-232 connection anymore. They have a USB type connector. So we use a serial to USB converter chip built into that big clunky plug that does the conversion for us. The problem with that is, in the old days, Prolific manufactured the chip that did that. And they charged quite a bit for it, and they built drivers for it that were wonderful. But then the Chinese started cloning those chips and making them by the millions and putting in the nice $2 cables we get on eBay. The problem is, Prolific got tired of providing drivers for people that were pirating their chips. So in around 2008, they changed both their chip and their driver to only talk to each other. And that means that when you install a new driver from Prolific, or when Windows updates and installs new drivers, frequently those drivers will not talk to the Chinese cables. And where you were programming your radio just fine 2 days ago, after Windows doesn't update, nothing talks to anything. And we're going to talk about how to fix that. There's another manufacturer of USB serial chips, FTDI. The Chinese have not cloned that chip, so FTD drivers work beautifully. The problem is that FTDI chipset is not used in a lot of cables. It's fairly rare to find. So I'm going to talk a little bit about driver issues now. Actually, first of all, the cables again. Talk about Kenwood standard. As I said, Amazon is selling that kind of cable for around $6 now, and they work great. Don't hesitate to buy one of those. You can have it next day and start programming the radio. I found them for as low as $3.09 on eBay. Haven't bought one of those. I have no idea how good they are. But my experience with them is that if you use the drivers that come with them, they probably work pretty good. And I'm going to talk about that issue of using the drivers that come on the mini CD with cables. The problem with that, again, is, especially in Windows 10, when Windows 10 does one of those automatic updates that it doesn't tell you about, it'll replace the driver with the generic Microsoft Prolific driver. And it doesn't work with the Chinese clones anymore. We've been through that. The reason I put this up here is because this is the radio I carry now. When I'm not doing anything that's hazardous, it's too damn expensive to let it fall off my belt and replace it. The thing that's unique about this is where most radios, you're lucky to get one interface that works. This guy has micro USB for programming that works beautifully. You can program it from Bluetooth, which is really cool. You can have it 10 feet away and program it, which is kind of neat. You can actually put your memory programs on the SD card, stick an SD card and program it from that. Or you can still program it from the standard Kenwood type microphone connectors. These guys have gone overboard on making it flexible, which is kind of neat. There we go. Drivers. Most cables you'll buy come with a mini CD with a driver on it for that cable. If you're just getting one cable for one set of radios, use that driver. It'll work. When Windows updates, you can delete the driver and reinstall that one. In general, you have to install the driver before connecting the cable. If you do it the other way, your computer's going to go out on the internet and look for what Microsoft recommends for what's reported as a prolific chipset, and it's going to download the Microsoft driver and it's not going to work. So install the driver manually from the CD before you connect the cable. As I said, as long as you're using one set of radios, one type of radio, one type of cable, you generally don't have much problem. When you get to a situation like mine where I'm programming 4 completely different radios in an afternoon with completely different cables, if you use the driver that comes with your cable, it may well not work. So finding the right drivers to work with it, I'm going to explain how that's been taken care of finally. Prolific clones are by far the most common adapter, and these are the last universal drivers that work with all of the prolific clones. So when you go to your system configuration, look at device drivers, if you find these numbers, the odds are your driver will work with any cables. And again, all this is on the website. I have included on the website 2 programs for 64-bit and 32-bit operating systems. I didn't write these programs, I take no responsibility for them, use them at your own risk, but they do, in fact, go through, first of all, they remove all the stuff in the registry and everything else about prolific drivers, so it cleans your systems so that you can install new drivers that will work. Secondly, it installs the generic prolific drivers that should work with all prolific chipsets. And thirdly, it tells Windows not to change the damn drivers, which is cool. This is reference information. I found a website that finally did a really thorough discussion of the prolific driver issue. I included that entire discussion on these slides. I'm not going to go through this here, but it's in the slide set on the website for your reference if you need it. Incidentally, that entire discussion is also on our website with my presentation materials as an HTML file, if you want to download it that way and look at it. Because I'm terrified that it's going to disappear from the site that it's on, so I wanted to record it. Okay. This is the kind of error you will see in your driver thing, this little yellow exclamation point here. If Windows is not happy with your drivers, that's what you'll see. And the programs that I've got on the website should take care of that. As I said, I put this in as reference, so I'm not going to go through it right now. But those are the 2 programs with instructions about how to install them, and they're on the website. Which incidentally was a little bit of work because the website is not happy about having executables on it, so I had to play with that a little bit. Go ahead.
So just to be clear, those 2 generic 64 and 32-bit programs, in your experience, they seem to be reliable, or everything is older, prolific?
That's another reason that I put them on our website, so they're static, because other places on the net, they may get changed and somebody may put viruses in them or do whatever. The ones I've got on our website are static. I've checked both of them. I haven't done a real thorough analysis of them for viruses. I think they're clean. Everything reports that they are.
You're using those?
I'm using those. And again, I take no responsibility for them. Use them at your own risk. But That's the best solution I've been able to come up with so far.
Say more than $5
Under what heading on the website?
I'm sorry?
Under what heading on the website?
On the Tech Field Day page, on the 2017 presentation, I'm actually going to look at that and I'll show you exactly on the website, so I got a connection there.
You know, I've gone hunting around and you got to drill down to find it.
I just put them there last night, so I will show you those. I'm going to walk through this
That's
stuff
okay.
live.
I can find it now.
Okay, so finally we're getting to software for programming your radios. Manufacturer supplied software can be, first of all, it's totally radio specific. The software you get from the manufacturer is going to program the particular radio you got the software with, which is fine. The advantage of that is that that software often allows you to program features of the radio like display color or soft key assignments or other stuff that chirp and even RTS software may not have gone to the trouble of including the programming for. So there's still a valid reason to use the manufacturer software. One of the issues can be the frequency range that the radio is programmed to operate through. And generally, chirp and RTS and the other generic softwares are not going to allow you to program that. The manufacturer's software frequently does allow you to change that frequency range so that you can reach GMRS frequencies or MURS or public service or whatever. Okay? So again, the manufacturer's software, it's still worth knowing it's there and using it because it'll frequently let you program things you can't otherwise program. Okay? Generally, the manufacturer software does not support generic import and export of memory data. I've got one Excel file that I've built with all the frequency tables that I like to use. And chirp and RTS both make it possible to import that directly into a programming file fairly easily. Generally, the manufacturer software doesn't do that. There are exceptions, but generally, in the manufacturer software, you have to manually enter every frequency set. And that's fine. It just takes all afternoon while you're drinking a beer out of your W0TLM stein. I call it Chinglish. I owned part of a technical translation company for a while. And translation is an interesting endeavor. The manufacturer's programs tend to have been originally written in Chinese as copies of programs that the Chinese guys got from someplace else, and the user interfaces can be entertaining.
And clumsy.
And the repeater entry methods for different manufacturer software can be unfriendly. Some of them support plus minus offset with a 0.6 megahertz. Some of them you have to enter both frequencies. Some of them you have to hold your tongue just right, and anyway, that's one of the disadvantages of manufacturer supplied software. User interfaces can just be weird. I've run into some of the manufacturer software that I got halfway through. I could make it work, and I thought, why the hell did they do this? I had to talk to the Chinese software developers. Finally, more manufacturers of radios, especially Baofeng and Oshan and QIT, are not even messing with trying to supply their own software, except for some specific small packages to do things like change the frequency band. And they're paying Chirp, the Dance Planet guys, to include their radios with Chirp, which is kind of neat, actually. It's pushing Chirp toward being a more and more generic industry standard tool, which is wonderful. This is the programming software for this radio, the Kenwood TB74. The reason I put it up here is as manufacturing software, this is probably the best it gets. This is one of the nicest manufacturer supplied software packages I've ever run into. Damn well should be for a $600 HT, but anyway, just an example, and it has all sorts of stuff that you can program the radio with besides just the memories. This is a really nice software package. It's an example of manufacturer-supplied software. But it still has, it was written in China, and it's still got some really weird language things in it. RT Systems. I recommend them highly. I bought a number of software packages from RT Systems. Again, it's very, very radio specific. You buy a package and a cable for a particular radio. It can seem a little expensive. This guy is the FT8500, which is the, in my mind, still the coolest radio ever made. This is a true radio geeks radio. If you've ever heard anybody talk about the Mr. Potato Head mic, this is that radio. It has squelch and volume controls for both channels on the mic, along with a joystick and all sorts of other controls. And the other side of the mic has a complete DTMF keypad. This is a geeky damn radio. Programming, it's a nightmare, and the package for this with its locked cable is about 49 bucks. So it's, after you spend an evening trying to program it, 50 bucks, it's cheap. So anyway, I recommend RT Systems. Be aware you're going to pay for the radio, or for the software and the cable and the software are locked to each other. Okay. Except for USB cables, which are generic. Lots and lots of radios supported. I think they're at almost 300 now. Generally, there are no cable driver issues. You install the software, you plug in the cable, you connect it to your radio, and you start programming. So that's a nice thing.
And it's a Colorado company.
It is a Colorado company. They're in Boulder or Fort Collins.
Fort Collins, I think.
But they're a good outfit. I've called them and talked to them a couple of times. Their support is wonderful. They will let you talk to an engineer, to a software guy.
They came to MegaFest last year too.
Yep. They'll be at MegaFest in July, I'm sure. They're a good outfit. I recommend them highly. And I don't mind paying for a product that does what it's supposed to do. You know? The user interfaces are excellent. It's Colorado English. Not even Texan English. It's Colorado English, and it's good stuff. They generally, some of the different radio packages are a little bit different from other packages, but they generally have really good import-export capability. So if you've written a memory file for one radio, you can take it to a different radio pretty easily with it. And here's the website, and I'm going to look at the website now. And what I want to point out, they're very proud of being up to 297 radio support at this point. This is a list of all the manufacturers they support. I do recommend these guys, even though it's paid software. I'm not going to go through an example of programming it, but this is what the user interface looks like, again, for my 8500.
Can it be fed by Excel?
Yeah, from a CSV. I'm going to talk about comma-separated values files, which is the easy way to have a text file that you can put all the radio information in and have it a single Excel file that you can write out as a CSV that you can import to these programs to program any radio. And generally, the RTS software supports CSVs very nicely, generally. Finally, we're going to get to Chirp. These guys have performed an amazing service. It's free software, it's open source. They actually supply the source code on the website. I like open source stuff. I'm an Ubuntu Linux guy. These guys are following that tradition. I'm very impressed with this group. They do accept donations, even though the software is free. I've donated money to them, and if you use their software, I'm not making a pitch for them, but they're worth supporting. They do support Mac and Linux. And as a matter of fact, I have taken the source code and fiddled with it a little bit and got it to run on my Android phone, which is kind of neat. You have to get cables and drivers working yourself with Chirp. And that can be a little bit of a challenge, as we've talked about. The Chirp people supply not a lot of formal support. If you write to them, generally they'll answer you and they'll address issues, but the community support is fantastic. If you post an issue on the chirp boards or on YouTube or Facebook or anywhere, you'll get an answer. And just about any issue you can have with chirp, somebody's already addressed and the answers are out there. Okay? There are kind of fundamentally two different things we're doing when we're programming radios. One is them is all the memories, the frequency tables. And chirp is very, very good at supporting all the different frequency stuff you can want to have in programming a radio. The feature set, display colors, mic level input, that kind of stuff is spotty. On some radios, especially the ones where the manufacturers paid for it, they do a really good job of supporting the features. On a lot of radios, they have no support whatsoever for the features. And that's not really a problem. Most of those features you can actually get through the menu system on the radio to change without too much trouble. But being able to program the memories is really important. Generally, chirp has really good import-export capability from CSV files, the chirp native file format, the radio's native file format, a bunch of other ways. And if you have, you can have two cables and two radios connected at once, be talking to both of them from one instantiation of chirp, and copy and paste stuff from one radio to another. Most of the time. There are radios where that's not so friendly, but it's an interesting capability. Many radio support. I'm going to talk about this. I've got a slide on it. The chirp supports lots and lots of radios, especially the Chinese guys, which is neat. It's updated almost daily. They add radios, they add features, they fix problems. So pretty much every time I get ready to run chirp, I go ahead and update it. It takes 30 seconds, and they add stuff all the time. Talked about radio to radio transfer. Chirp makes it really easy to have 20 different radios from 10 different manufacturers and 20 different models, all similarly programmed. Obviously, the radios have slightly different structures, so you can't program them exactly the same. Although it looks to me like the Chinese are now using pretty much the same firmware and chipset in all the radios you buy from them. So you can program all your radios to kind of look and feel the same, which is neat. This is the website. In the slide set, I have the complete demonstration I'm about to do in the slides. So when you download the slide set from the website, you can walk through the same thing. But I'm going to try to do the slide, which is always kind of taking your life in your hands. And we'll see how what we do here. So, and I'm going to be looking here, so if it gets weird on the screen, let me know. Let's see.
As far as I'm concerned, we could pay you for this presentation.
I am pleased enough. Okay, this is the website. And it's a very basic, simple website. They don't do anything very fancy. The one thing that I do want to show here is, let's see, here. The wiki tab here shows all of the current supported radios, and it's lots. One of the things I find interesting about this is that they're supposedly getting ready to support the 74, which I'd like to see, and more importantly to me, they support things like my old 7100, which is really nice. And they actually do a pretty good job of feature programming as well as frequency programming a bit. It's basically an HF radio that also supports VHF and UHF, and being able to program that from one place is really nice. So this is on the front page of their website. It's really easy to get to a list of the radios they support. And if they say they support a radio, generally it's pretty good support. File formats they support, CSVs, so it's really easy to move from Excel into, let me see that, okay, yeah. From Excel or a spreadsheet. Go ahead.
I got to ask you, do you have to tweak those files sometimes? Because Excel doesn't follow the strict guidelines for CSV.
Yes, absolutely. That's more an Excel problem than it is a chirp problem, and the answer is yes.
But Microsoft there really just didn't implement
That's
that.
one reason I use OpenOffice instead of Microsoft Office. My experience with OpenOffice is if I tell it to make me a text CSV file, it does a pretty good job of doing that.
But Excel will leave out the quotes a lot
Yep.
of times that you really need
Yep.
to bring in text.
Yep. The other thing I found is that probably 3/4 of the time when I'm editing one of these CSV files, I do it in Notepad. That way I know it's leaving in a plain text file. And it's not fiddling with it when it saves it. It supports a number of other file formats. In fact, it supports the RTS version of a CSV file, which is kind of neat. Okay, so I'm going to download and install the software now. First of all, you hit the Get It button. It takes you to the downloads. And notice here we have Mac and Linux supported. We're going to go to the Windows page. And here's the page for probably 90% of everybody that goes to Chirp goes right here and hits the green bar. That's the current install program, and it just works. So we click this, and note that it is date coded. And most of the time when I download software, other softwares, I save it, so I'll have a record of it. With Chirp, I don't even bother with that anymore, because I'm going to get a new version tomorrow anyway. So I just tell it to run it.
Say, Chip,
Yeah.
since you're recording this presentation, part of your
Yeah, I know.
Can you take your screen out of maximize and maybe just scale?
Yeah, let me see what we can do here. Is that better?
Yeah, it's got a, well, you can then expand that out a little bit.
Yeah. We're not going to stay here very long anyway. Windows will run a security scan on this, and that's going to take a few seconds, so we're waiting it to finish that up. Any other questions while it's doing that? It's, like I said, Chirp is very straightforward, very easy. I've got my, how many of you have a UV5? This is probably the single most common Chinese. I love these things. They're reasonably indestructible. They're almost throwaway now. There's lots of stuff you can get for them. One of the problems with them is that if you use the manufacturer's software for them, thank you, it tends to, there are, I think, 4 or 5 firmware revisions of the UV5VR floating around, and the manufacturer's software is picky about which one it's talking to. Chirp isn't. It talks to all of them, which is kind of neat.
This is KD0RU.
That are going to do the install. Just use the defaults generally, and there it goes. It's, oh hell. And it's the first time I've had a problem with it, so naturally, may have gotten a bad download. We'll try it. Actually, what I'm going to do is, rather than that, I did just download it earlier. So I'm going to just go to my installed Chirp.
Have you ever had an experience, the dreaded experience of making a brick out of a radio?
I thought I did a couple of times, and I've been able to recover them so far. Again, that's one of the things I like about the little cheap UV5Rs. Generally that happens when you're doing something kind of weird. And if I'm doing something kind of weird to a radio, I try to do it with radios that are somewhat expendable.
Well, I've got an old Sheen, a little bit different model than what most people have. And they did an update. And
Yeah.
I was told if you use the original software on this updated job, that it would make a brick out of it.
Yeah.
So I've been pretty careful.
You certainly
I'm
can.
tempted to use the manufacturer's.
If you screw up the firmware updates, you definitely can kill a radio.
But a lot of these cheaper Chinese won't update.
Right.
Anyway.
And frankly, my experience with updates is they don't really generally buy you that much. So.
Well, I always read through what it does.
Yeah.
And sometimes it fixes some glaring error in the initial
Yep.
shipment.
Okay, so this is Chirp. The first thing you're going to do in Chirp is download from a radio so that you can get something in here. Anytime you're trying to program a radio, pretty much in any software you might use, download from the radio first. That way the software is used to talking to it, you know what's in there, and it gets the communications established. And in fact, Chirp won't allow you to program a radio to be downloaded from it. So I know this is on COM3, and Chirp does a nice job of only showing COM ports that exist. We're picking a Beifeng, and notice that manufacturer list. Again, this is extensive. And they're adding more all the time, and probably 95% of all the radios I've picked up are supported by Chirp.
What have you found that isn't?
I'm sorry?
What have you found that isn't supported? They don't do high terra, do they?
I don't know if they are yet. And the high terras are more commercial radios than ham radios. So Chirp's really not particularly interested in them. Chirp is not supporting my 74 yet. It's not supporting my 991A yet, which annoys me because I'd really like to be able to do some stuff with that. I think they will support both of those. There's some older radios that it doesn't support, where RT Systems is very good about supporting obsolete radios because they wrote the stuff for them 15 years ago and they just keep it available. Where Chirp is a more recent phenomenon. And this is as I said, there are a number of versions of the UV5. I think we're up to C or D now. And Chirp just calls it an X, and it'll talk to pretty much any of them.
Well, it even worked on my GT3.
Yeah. And it warns you that you can screw up your radio doing this. So pretty much Chirp says they're experimental on anything they do, so do it at your own risk, which is what any sensible software manufacturer says about anything anymore, because there are too many lawyers around that like to. So we're cloning from the radio now. And you can see a flashing little light. Now we're reading from the radio, I should say. And it's that simple to get started with. One thing to keep in mind, and the warning from Chirp tells you this, is generally you want the volume control pretty close to maximum on HTs, because the volume on these is actually a potentiometer. It's a hard volume control, and if you got it turned way down, the computer can't hear it. Okay, so if you have problems, be aware that the first thing to do is turn the volume up. There's what this radio is programmed to. It's like the entire memory. Now, one thing we'll notice if I click on settings here, UV5 series is pretty well supported for settings. You can change standby little LED that lights up when it's doing stuff. You can change the color it uses for receive versus transmit. All the neat little features they built into this radio you can control from Chirp. Okay. Anything funny here? It's just kind of neat.
Is there anything you automatically change from the initial settings?
Yes, if you don't remember what they are for different radios, to be honest with you.
Well, I was talking about that one.
5R, again, I've been playing so much with my 74 for the last few months, I don't really remember.
Have you got a cheat sheet for them?
No, when I sit down with it, I look through it and kind of remember stuff. Generally, when I find something on Chirp that supports the settings, I walk through and just take a look at what's there. Because every once in a while you find something weird that you didn't know about. You go, God, that's kind of cool.
One of the things that I like to change is a timeout timer.
Exactly, yeah.
Because it's usually set to like 60 seconds or something. I'm too windy.
And because I've got one hand and a fake thumb, this is my second left toe, by the way. One of my horses crushed my thumb and they rebuilt my hand. But it doesn't work very good. So one of the things I do is change the display backlight timeout to make it last longer, because by the time I figure out where my thumb is on a button, the light's gone out and I can't figure out what it's doing. Anyway, so let's real quickly just change the memory. Let's see, something I don't care about. We'll just change the nomenclature on this, the name of it, to call 1, just so I can write something back to the radio. So Change that. Now I do radio, upload to radio. Same settings we already had. Let's grade that out because it's working. I can have several different files talking to several different radios open at once here, which is kind of neat. I can actually copy and paste from one file to another. And I do that quite a bit actually. And again, it gives me all the warnings, and we tell it to do it. And the light should start flashing, and we're writing out the radio now.
Flashing green.
Good.
Isn't the radio transmitting at this point also? I thought one of the radios I was programming, it said pick a frequency that nobody is on and set your radio to that.
Because some of them use the push-to-talk connector on the connector as part of the interface.
The Baofeng is not one
The
of those?
Baofengs I don't think do, no. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty confident they don't.
What radio would?
The Yaesu does. The Yaesu.
Yeah, some of the Yaesus. But again, it depends on the connector. Read the instruction. And generally, Chirp's pretty good about if there's something you ought to know about like that, it'll tell you before you start writing to it. Yeah.
So you've got your frequencies up here right now. Could you plug in your other radio and write to that, or do you export it and then put your other radio in and import what the radio has and then?
I don't have another cable, but what it would do is this tab right here, that's this file. If I had another radio plugged in that I'd read from, as a matter of fact, let me do that. That's open recent, let's pull this guy up. It just puts another tab up there.
Okay, so by default it has this IMG file. Can you write that one file to any radio as long as you pick the right radio?
The image means it's a manufacturer-specific image.
Okay.
So in general, no. But what I can do is copy a row here and copy this and go over here and paste it in.
Wow. That's mind-blowing.
But that's pretty damn cool, actually. Again, be aware though, some radios program in plus minus offset and frequency offset. Some radios program in transmit and receive frequency. Chirp doesn't take care of that for you. You have to be aware of that and deal with it. Okay. The other thing I'm going to show you here is the stock config is wonderful. And I'm going to put in my standard disclaimer here. GMRS and FRS, the General Mobile Radio Service and Family Radio Service, these radios are not type approved for transmission on those frequencies.
Too much power.
Too much power, they have removable antennas. Actually, I looked at the GMRS specs the other day. If you have the license for GMRS, you can transmit up to 50 watts. And you can use an external antenna.
But not in FR.
FRS is limited to half a watt and a solidly attached antenna. If you're going to use your radios for GMRS and FRS activity, and there's nothing, I sometimes will carry a $5 FRS radio on my belt when I'm working with the welder that's repeating through my base station, because that way I've got a little radio, and if I weld it like I did my phone one time, it doesn't break my heart. I've got a brand new phone from AT&T. I'm up on the roof welding something on my mast. Phone falls out of my pocket as I'm reaching for it. A big spot of molten steel falls on the display. Anyway, so there's a bunch of stuff that Chirp has sort of built into it. The MURS channels, the old VHF business band frequencies, you can just load them here and insert them directly into your radio. Again, the radio has to be open to transmit on those frequencies. And frequently, especially with like this guy, which was very disappointing. It has this beautiful big display and they really didn't do much with it. But this comes now, the Chinese are getting better about shipping their radios to the US limited to ham band transmission frequencies. You can't open them up. Generally, you have to use the manufacturer's software. They have a specific program you have to download to do that. And again, I'm not recommending that by any means because it's technically illegal. So, If anybody asks you about it, I didn't tell you to do it.
Well, there's a difference between Part 90 radio and Part 97.
Yeah,
And a lot of these Chinese radios are Part 90,
yeah,
which is technically commercial use.
exactly.
But no commercial activity is going to use a $30 radio that I know of.
Actually, a lot of them, like Home Depot does.
Do they
They
really?
use cheapies, absolutely. Anyway, they've also got the Marine VHF channels in here. Chirp is a very flexible program. They've got a tremendous amount of stuff built in. And they also have all the weather alert channels, of course. And let's see, what was I looking for? They have the ability to import, directly talk to different repeater directories. I'm going to wrap up here pretty quickly, but and they also have this import and export capability, so I can write out the CSV files or read from CSV files. And when you're writing these, I'm going to do it.
May have popped up a window that you can't.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
I don't see it.
Well, all I was going to tell you is that when you do that import or export, I don't know that's what happens when you do a live demo. You never know what's going to happen. Well, all I want to tell you there is it's going to pop up a window that shows receive frequency, mnemonic, channel number, and a couple of other things. It doesn't show the offset or the a lot of other information about a particular memory channel. And I said, well, I want all that other stuff too. It actually writes it into the file. All it's showing you that display for is so you can change the order of the memories. So when it writes the CSV file, it'll put all that information you need into it. Okay, any other questions about Chirp? Because I'm going to move on from this now. We could spend a day fiddling with Chirp, but the thing to do is download it and play with it. Yeah.
We're out of time.
Yep, 2 more slides and just to show people where to get stuff. Back here.
So you don't have to plug a line down.
Okay, repeater list, this is in the presentation. There's a lot of other places to go to look for repeaters, but if you download the PDF file or the PowerPoint file for this presentation, these are live links. You can click on these and it'll take you right to that webpage. Okay? My list is a CSV on the website. I've got about 50 front range repeaters listed in there. W0TLM has produced a list as well. It's on there, and so take a look at those. And finally, I did what I wanted to do. Since we've got the website up, right here. There we go. This is the stuff that I've already got posted on the website.
Oh, wow.
This presentation is both a PDF and a PowerPoint. That discussion about the prolific chipset fix is in HTML, as well as being built into both the presentations. The installers, these are executables, and again, use them at your own risk. And my CSV file, chips. Okay?
We appreciate you.